Welcome to Downtown Fayetteville's Livable Centers Initiative. This is our second community meeting. And we thought we would actually use this photo to kick off because the beauty of it is that it tells us that change is already happening, right? The fact that we are right here in this room overlooking this park, which has become the spring point of action, I think just gives us this platform as to what we can anticipate that could come out of our collaboration together. So just to ground everyone, we are looking at a downtown area that is beyond just what you call as downtown here at Fayetteville. It's about 900 acres. So this is really thinking at a very high level. I did want to share that this is part of the ARC framework for Livable Centers Initiative. And the reason why we need to mention that is this is a downtown master plan that is looking fundamentally at how can we improve walkability? How can we give a sense of identity? What would be the place that downtown can become? So it is less about the minute details of what functions in terms of the different areas in downtown. It's more about the big ideas. The fact that we can come up with a cohesive vision collectively is really the opportunity at hand. So where are we on this process? We talked about how we were going to set up a 4-step process. And I'm representing HKS, which is the firm that is leading the Livable Centers Initiative. I'm Shiva Ross, I'm an urban designer. And with me, actually, we have a pretty robust team, both in person and online. So we have NV5, if you don't mind just raising your hands. NV5 is taking care of mobility and zoning. We have Office of Design. I think most of you know Daniel is giving us quite tremendous advice on really what works in Fayetteville. We have PEC, both online and in person, and they have looked at all our existing conditions. So everything that you participated in last time was talking about, this is what we've observed. And then PEC also takes care of landscape. And in addition, we have been working with Blue Cypress as part of our public engagement and Noelle in terms of our market study. The other person you see here is Jinwoo. He's actually my colleague with HKS. So we set up this 4-step process. We went through and investigate. The last time we were in the same room virtually was explore. So what you see here on the side, and maybe I'll just minimize this. What you see here on the side is the notes that we captured after our last meeting together. If you remember, so actually let's have a show of hands. Raise your hand if you participated in the community meetings on February 11th and 12th. That's wonderful. So we have returning participants, and then we have some new folks in the room. And online, feel free to just use the chat function to let us know if you participated. But just to remind you, we asked you 3 big questions. What would you like to preserve? What would you like to change? And how can you imagine a downtown that kind of preserves the best of today, but positions you for tomorrow? So here you see some snapshots of what we heard. And if you remember, I think one of the most profound statements came from the room talking about how downtown should be a heart and not just an artery. Right now, people use downtown to pass through. What if you actually stop and experience the soul of downtown? So in addition to that, just following our last meeting together, we launched a survey. And it was absolutely fantastic because we received 1,037 responses. And it was through paper survey, it was through online. You see the box there in the room where I'm pointing and where we've captured it on screen. We had local artists design these boxes. One of it was in Sam's barbershop. You can see a snapshot there. And we were just extremely thrilled with the kind of feedback we got in the responses. So what you see here is a capture of what we heard through that survey. So you see there's a little difference between how we had our last community meeting and the survey. So the survey questions helped us to understand what is it that you want to see more in downtown? What are your ambitions for your streets, your paths, your trails? What kind of housing is maybe lacking here in downtown or things that you want to add? And then the kinds of open spaces. And again, one of the top priorities, a recurring statement that came up was this idea of let's keep downtown authentic. You know, we are not here to raise anything and bring in the new. We are here to enhance the best of what you already have. So since then, I think one of the biggest outcomes of the community meeting is naming this project. If you remember, we asked you, and this particular name, Moving Fayetteville Forward, came to the top of the list. So we no longer go through the long name of Downtown Fayetteville Livable Centers Initiative. We call it as Moving Fayetteville Forward. But as a team got together, we started thinking, what does it mean to move forward? And I think one idea that came to the surface is the fact that moving forward is not just in one direction. Like we can think about our opportunity here with downtown as a compass. And if you actually literally take the fact that a compass has NSEW, which is north, south, east, and west, and connect it with the idea of what the Livable Centers Initiative really needs, we feel that your compass, moving Fayetteville forward, can be set with this idea of nature. You have abundant nature here. You have representation from the Southern Conservation Trust. And you have creeks. You have access to large, beautiful open spaces. So we wanted to commit to preserve nature. We wanted to look at economy. So Brian, I hope you're happy with that because that's a central pillar, right? It's really no use having a plan that doesn't have strong economic impact. So we want to commit to economy. And then the S we are using for social. Social because almost everything that you all spoke about is about human connection. When we asked about what you wanted to do in your spaces, you talked about different ways of bringing the society together. So we put an S with social, and the W actually pays homage to what ARC requests out of this initiative, which is keep it walkable. And walkability, you know, transcends so many different areas, right? It's about how can we have multiple generations walk to these spaces. Those with different abilities use these walkable spaces. How can we coexist with our cars? Because we want to make it safe, but we still have to be able to go through in our cars. So this is a way by which we are branding this initiative, and we hope that you will contribute to how can we create this compass that is meaningful for nature, economy, the social aspect, and the walkable aspect. So let's do this both in our Zoom room and in person. What is this saying? Marwa, if you can go ahead and get them to get our Zoom room to start prompting in our chat. What do you think this is saying? Yes, actually that's what I'm asking. I'm asking if, for those of you in Zoom, if you can go ahead and start typing in, what are we seeing here? I need to remove this. What does it look like? Is that what it looks like? That's what it looks like now. I feel like most of you are okay with like putting in your answer in like a Zoom chat rather than when you're in the room. Go ahead.
Good evening and thank you. Two things. You raised, this is such a big, beautiful room, and the projection of your voice is important.
Yes.
So I want to be able to hear you crisper.
Okay.
So bring it up a little bit.
Sure.
The second thing is you asked a question. I think these 4 key indicators are critical to the community of Fayetteville.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an economic gardener, and so when I see economy, the first question I'm going to ask is, what does that really mean for Fayetteville? As far as building capacity for small business ownership, creating opportunities for that to be not just a trend, but an institution specifically around downtown small business. I'm part of the Shop Local. I help launch that. And so I want to be able to be part of that in the city since it's now my new home. And I just want to understand what does that really mean for the economy?
So actually you hit all the right points, right? So let's go back to this definition that we get from the Atlanta Regional Commission's Livable Centers Initiative grant. They want to envision their communities as vibrant, walkable places that offer increased mobility options, encourage healthy lifestyles, and provide improved access to jobs and services. So the economic aspect for this particular initiative is more about things that you mentioned, right? How can we keep the jobs here? How can we make sure that our small businesses are supported and they don't feel that they have to be replaced? How can we ensure that our businesses who've been here for a long time still find their place and are able to serve meaningfully? But on the other hand, we looked at the market study and we understand the demand for offices, the demand for new retail, which is what you're seeing up in these boards, and we have to balance them. So where can we locate them so that there is a good synergy between them? So when we think about homes, we can't just think about single family homes anymore. We have to think about this idea of pocket neighborhoods because we want to improve that interaction. So economy, and I say this a lot, sometimes we think of economy just in terms of dollars, but I think Livable Centers initiatives gives us an opportunity to think of ROI as people. You know, like how can we get the best out of our people? The only way you can get back is when you invest meaningful. And that's what we're trying to frame here.
Thank you.
Sure. So going back to this, I think there was an overwhelming consensus that this does look like prevention works, but I'm going to put a pin on that. We'll get back to this. And if you have any other thoughts of what else this could be, I'm not saying that it's not prevention works, but I'm just really very curious if anyone, you know, has any other guesses. So knowing that we want to set this up as a compass, I'd like for you to imagine this kind of character identity for your downtown. We talked about how you have about 900 acres, and we want to give it a sense of identity. So what we were looking at in terms of a progress since the last time we spoke is what if we imagined the central downtown area as a core, and what happens in the north really as a gateway. And the reason we're thinking of this as a gateway is because we see this opportunity that's going to be happening in the North 85 corridor. We can see how, as people drive down from Atlanta, what's their first introduction to these, to the beautiful Fayetteville downtown? What are you going to be doing in that North 85 area that could revitalize and become a portal to your downtown? So we were hoping we could characterize that area as the gateway. And then you have the village. The village is really an offshoot of what is already happening with your planned unit development. You have the villages of Lafayette. You have a really well set planned community. And we would like to continue that character towards the east, towards the northwest of the core. And then we have this interesting synergy. As we studied what you mentioned about what needs to be preserved, what needs to be changed, and what can be reimagined, we saw this dichotomy of the history and the future. Understanding what's happening in Sugar Hill community, knowing exactly where your religious institutions are, we feel this idea of the root. The root is something that establishes the foundation. It's something that needs to be preserved, but it can grow into something new, right? And we want to enhance Sugar Hill community. We want to enhance and improve the accessibility. We want to retain our religious institutions, but see what can happen in their parking lots. So this characterization of a route plays really well with its counterpart, which is the idea of the edge. When you think of the edge, it is almost a play on the word leading edge. This notion that the innovation could happen. You have a large parcel of land available there, right where you have offices, and you have everything happening with the Southern Conservation Trust kind of come together to create a nexus. So we believe that creating it as an edge will give it that purpose for innovation and have a very interesting kind of a relationship with the root area. So this is just thinking of it in terms of broad character themes. And with that, I'd like to welcome Russ, who can talk about what this means in terms of notes for these.
I think that's something we all wonder about. A lot of times you say, yeah, it'll be a security system for $1 million. Guess what they told me?
Thanks, Steve. My name is Russ Harrington, and I'm with the Landscape Architecture Division of TDC Plus called the 360 Studio. And we were looking at recommendations for parks and open space within the downtown study area of Fayetteville. We really based it on two things. One was community feedback from the previous meetings, what people wanted to see in their city, what activities people wanted to have within their city that were accessible to them, and just basically what people wanted. And then we also looked at available vacant spaces within the city, and that's where we based our recommendations for parks and open space. The first one that really stands out that I'd like to mention first is on the edge of Jeff Davis and Lanier and Stonewall. There's actually a conglomeration of vacant spaces right there on that edge that were identified as potential use for public space. And so there's a park close to where I live called the Abernathy Greenway. And we break up in smaller groups. I actually have some photographs of that particular park space that is very similar to this particular area. It's right next to a busy road, and they used some vacant land to actually create some public space. They did a multitude of things. They created interesting playground spaces, similar to kind of what you see out the window there in this new park that they developed here next to the City Hall. They developed a lot of fencing and edging along the edge of the park next to the busy road, and it is next to a busy 4-lane road, which makes it an odd space for a particular park, but the success of it really stood out to me, and how it's really close to some adjacent neighborhoods that were walkable to the space. And again, when we break out into the smaller groups, I can show you some photos of that actual place. But it sort of starts to set a tone for where a public space node could be within the study area. The second place I'll mention is along Jeff Davis on the, it's labeled here as Streetscape. Basically, I just noticed that that would be such a great gateway into the downtown area that kind of terminates into this park space. What can we do with those existing old homes that everybody seems to like to go to for dinner, or it's actually, you know, a lot of older homes that have been repurposed for commercial uses. And so there could be things the city could do to incentivize, you know, little pocket parks or some seating areas, or, you know, maybe it's street lights with some floor arrangements, or, you know, nothing too high maintenance, but just something that could incentivize some public activity. Canton Street in Roswell is a great example of this. And when we break out in small groups, I have some photos of that as well that we can talk about in more detail. But moving actually west from the park I was talking about first, there's another vacant space in between Lanier and Stonewall that really serves as a great opportunity for public gathering spaces. That there was a strong desire that was one of the actually activities within the city that everybody liked to do, markets with tents, farmers markets, things like that, that were taking place on the road. I believe it was mentioned that they were taking place on Lanier and some on Stonewall, but it'd be great if we had a place where that could take place, you know, all the time. And it was a place that wouldn't impede traffic and could connect to the whole downtown activity that we're talking about creating in this space. So that's actually that little smaller green bubble next to the one off Jeff Davis that we were just mentioning. And the last one that I'll talk about, well, that's actually two more, but the last one that I'll actually talk about in a little bit in greater detail is the area that's next to the amphitheater. There's a vacant space in this area that's not heavily wooded, but it's actually kind of nice and openly wooded, which is a unique situation. And it serves as a great opportunity for a transition for the activities going on at the amphitheater and the activity that we're trying to implement on the downtown core area. So it kind of serves as a great transition space to get people safely from the downtown area to the amphitheater, and possibly create some nice public space that does more than just add a transitional space between the amphitheater and downtown, but could also be perhaps a park, or maybe a sort of a more open area type of park, rather than the one I was just mentioning earlier, where you could have bigger lawns and things like that. So, and the last bubble that's in this southwest corner of the graphic here is really just highlighting the public space that's already planned by the city, that they're collaborating with the Southern Conservation Trust to create some connecting trails off Brady Avenue and some of the newly acquired property by the Southern Conservation Trust. And I just highlighted that because that is a nice public space that the city is actually pursuing at the moment with the beer garden and some other things in that area. So with that, I'll turn it over to Daryl, who can talk more about the transportation connections.
Yeah, as we're looking at these parks as different nodes, the next question became, but how do we link these parks, right? So that they're meaningful and they connect with the existing trails. So that's really where we'd like to talk the details of this.
Right. Well, good afternoon or evening. My name is Daryl. I'm with NV5, and as you know, Russ and Sheba have mentioned, I deal with transportation. I'm in our transportation and traffic group with NV5. So a large part of what we were thinking about on transportation with this project revolved around mobility, connectivity, and accessibility. One of the things that we heard in our public meetings the first time around and talking was the fact that folks wanted to be able to move around Fayetteville a little bit easier, not necessarily by car, but by walking, by biking, by being able to jog, and not necessarily even to do it along streets with some of the existing sidewalks, but also to be able to do it along trails, and have bike lanes and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we did through this is to begin to look at where there were existing facilities, existing sidewalks, existing trails, roadways that had low traffic volumes, or at least had enough room where you could do some things, and began to plan out spaces to build those trails, to build those additional sidewalks, and then more or less close gaps between some of those areas, because one of the things that we found is that on the edges, and we'll go back and talk about the core areas, but on the edges, there were a lot of facilities, a lot of sidewalks, a lot of trails that kind of came up to the edge of downtown, or this downtown study area, and then just disappeared. So the idea then was to try to connect those, One of the other things that we wanted to do as well, and this goes to what Russ was saying, is that as we began looking at parks and open spaces, and places where people could gather, looking at communities, we wanted to be able to try to connect those communities with those parks and open spaces, connect those communities with downtown businesses, connect those communities with the center of government, and just all the activities that we're looking at for downtown. And again, we're not focusing on cars, we're focusing on people being able to, just come from the community, take a nice comforting walk, ride a bicycle, walk with the children, and be able to get to some of these places. And then even for the folks that are going to drive, some opportunities for them to be able to come and park, and park one time, and to be able to get out and walk around through downtown. So one of those opportunities is what we're calling the Alleyway Project. It is the area between, help me out with my streets here, area between Stonewall and Lafayette, where the Lanier, I'm sorry, Lanier, and Lanier and Lafayette. And if you know where the taco restaurant is, and the idea of being able to one, have a place where people could go park, be able to get to those businesses there, but then also be able to enjoy that space. So formalizing the alleyway behind that, and having a place where people could come and park, be able to get out, go to the restaurant, sit on the patio, that be oriented, more towards that street instead of 85, and be able to just, like I said, travel that way, and then also have it be a walkable space. So what we're showing here is basically not necessarily what it will be, but the idea of how the street could actually function. And like I said, it's more of an alleyway than a formal street. Some of the other things that we looked at as well were how how streets like Lafayette could function. The idea that there are bicycle facilities within the Lafayette community, and then some on-street bicycle facilities on the main street on 54. One of the pieces of feedback that we got was that there was a desire to have some more on-street bicycle facilities. Well, first thing that we think of when we talk about that is we want to make sure that the street is usable for everybody, but we also want to make sure that cyclists are safe, that we're not putting them in a situation where there would be some sort of conflict between them and the vehicle. And so the concept that we came up with here is something called a share rail, or shared bicycle lane. That ability to be able to have a lower speed street and also have the markings out that would allow cyclists to be able to use it. So it tells the driver this street is also to be used by cyclists, but it also gives the cyclists a space to be able to use the street. We looked at that not only for Lafayette Street, but we looked at the ability to do that in Church Street and be able to connect the communities over on Church Street. And then in addition to looking at streets, we also looked at some cross-parcel connections, basically ways to allow pedestrians to walk from east to west, from Lafayette over to Church Street. So, there's this idea of just having these short pedestrian connections and trails that allow folks to, cut across and go from one area to another. Like there's a really nice park on Church Street. And so the idea that, folks could be able to connect into that space from their neighborhoods and, vice versa, be able to connect from Church Street and get into the shops in downtown was one of the critical things that we thought about through this. I think the two biggest areas that we looked at though had to deal with Jeff Davis and also had to deal with the trail a concept for a trail for the Southern Conservation Trust area. And so I'll talk about Jeff Davis first. One of the things that was expressed to us at the outset of this whole effort was that there were some safety issues on Jeff Davis, in particular with the fact that he had this tree-lined median, but there was really not a median there. The folks were coming out of businesses, coming out of driveways and cutting across. That, in itself posed a safety hazard just because folks, will come out and cut across the median and, cars coming down Jeff Davis couldn't see them sometimes because of the trees, or sometimes people couldn't see around the trees and didn't know a car was coming. So, there were a large number of crashes that were there. So one of the things that we are proposing to be done is to just, don't get rid of the median, but raise the median, put a curb around it to prevent people from crossing over. And so if folks want to make that turn, they have to actually go to an intersection and turn out to either go north or south. Like I said, the idea that, you've got folks just kind of crossing, darting across, it was a safety issue. And we had data to back it up to show that there were a lot of crashes along that area. The other thing that we heard as well about Jeff Davis. The idea that they wanted it, the idea that people wanted it to be more walkable and more bikeable. So we talk about the idea of the shared bike lane, just reallocating the space along Jeff Davis, those two lanes, because right now there are two, it's a four-lane roadway. Each of those lanes is 12 feet wide. If we just took a little bit of space from one of those lanes, the inside lane, that we could actually create the space for bicyclists to be able to travel in. And also narrowing that lane would slow the traffic down along Jeff Davis as well. It provides this visual cue for drivers that the street is narrower and that they can't drive as fast. I think the last component that for Jeff Davis that we were proposing as well is to give the pedestrians, the folks that are walking on the sidewalks, a little bit more space from the street. If you note now, the little planting strip between where the roadway ends and where the sidewalk begins is about 2 feet wide. We're proposing moving the sidewalk back, anywhere between 5 to 6 feet, and then widening the sidewalk. So again, these are just kind of ideas, but the concept was about how to slow the traffic down, make the streets safer, and give people a better way to move that let them feel a little bit more comfortable. Finally, when we talk about the Southern Conservation Land Trust trail, there was a strong desire to be able to connect from their property that they have purchased and to connect out to the ridge area, and to maybe even connect to other locations in Fayetteville, maybe over to Trillet or some of the areas, trail areas up near Hood Avenue. So we put together a concept then for this trail that could follow some of the waterways, follow some of that wooded area, and it would be a true trail, wide trail that would allow cyclists, walkers, folks out, for a jog. But not only would it just be, it wouldn't just be a trail, but along the trail you could also have spaces where folks could sit down with like on a bench to enjoy nature. There might be a pocket park along that trail with a feature that goes along with that. And so with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague Neil Desai to talk about the zoning.
Thank you. My name is Neil Desai with NV5. I'm a city planner, and one of my main roles in this project is to examine the existing zoning code and propose a new way of zoning in the city that's really going to bring together all of these thoughts and values that we've come across in the comprehensive plan and through the public engagement that we've already done for this meeting. So on the screen right now is the existing zoning map, and it's for downtown area, and it's a typical zoning map in that the primary differentiator in the colors is the land use, residential, commercial, and so looking at this map, you can sort of see the orange kind of making up the downtown area and such, but largely we're going to be taking a different approach to looking at how regulations are created in this area. And this is kind of the final kind of layer. We've been looking methodically at general theme areas, which is what Sheba presented. We're looking at landscape areas and transportation, and now like what are the rules going to be for the future? And so this map here, and we have a board in the back which we can all kind of look at it in more detail. This map is what we're calling character districts. We're drilling down into a slightly more detail into the different areas that Sheba had called the themes, the route, the gateway. And so this map is based on what is the existing kind of types of buildings you have on the ground? What is their common landscape features? And when you start to kind of look at some of these boundaries, it's logical because there's downtown, as you start going down South Glen, the dark purple area, the pink area is the downtown core. You know, the buildings are still close to the street, and then eventually they start becoming farther apart as you get to the bottom of South Glen, where there's another area that that's kind of more commercial industrial. And so you can start to see how these areas kind of make sense in terms of what's already on the ground, the types of architecture and the types of buildings that are there. And so, and you could see the orange area, which is just above the downtown core, is where you're going to be having, your planned developments already underway. They're going to be larger scale than what's going on in the traditional downtown. So this isn't the zoning map, but it's starting to look at how are we going to start, what are the envelopes in which we're going to be looking at zoning. And we want to respect the fact that downtown is one place, but they're consisted of different feelings around different areas. And I think, the traditional downtown core across from the courthouse, you have those small Main Street buildings. And so for each of these different areas, the question is, what's going to be the future like? And it doesn't necessarily mean development, it could be preservation. And so certainly the Main Street buildings, the ones that line near the courthouse, are things you want to preserve and potentially promote more of in that downtown core area, because those are really the core downtown walkable part of the city of Fayetteville. And then there's certain areas that that currently have a lot of empty parcels or that are kind of in between areas. So some of the pink areas you see are kind of transition areas where, namely and along between Lafayette and Lanier, there's a lot of land in that area. Those are kind of transition areas between the villages of Lafayette and North Glen. And so when you start to look at, you can see how the map starts to have a lot of logic within it. You have the office cluster there on the left along Stonewall, which is in the blue. You have the church, kind of the church campus area on the other side along on East Stonewall. And then you have the government campus, the county offices in the civic area. And so these are kind of the districts where we're kind of starting to identify and start to kind of think about what are the regulations in each of these districts going to do. And that's going to be based on the feedback that we have. And so ultimately, this is not the city of Fayetteville here, but this is just an example of how the zoning may be different. It could be based on building types. So we have a lot of recognizable building types here in Fayetteville. Looking at North Jefferson, for example, you have the kind of residential converted into offices, which is really beautiful. And so you'd want to obviously see that in the future and maintain that. And so, what you'd start to see in a zoning code in the future in Fayetteville is, matching these types of buildings, some of which are existing building types, some of which are new building types, and showing what areas within the city in the map I started showing you would these buildings be permitted. And so you will have, in a residential district, you obviously want to have the single family homes. Perhaps there's areas you want to introduce the pocket neighborhoods that Shiva was talking about. So part of the reason for having a zoning code like this is so it's a little more predictable. When you have a kind of a text-based zoning code, it's really hard to tell what you're going to get. But when you have something that's based on the building forms, it starts to become predictable, where you can see, okay, what is the type of development that's going to be allowed here, in addition to what's already there that may be permitted. And then the diagrams of you'll have diagrams in the code which will really be clear, and they won't be solely text-based, but they'll give you a sense of what the different arrangements are of the building and the lot, so it makes sense. And for example, on North Jefferson, there's a large setback of a beautiful lawn that's very consistent, and so that's something you want to kind of maintain along North Jefferson. And also, I think one thing I want to say is that there's certain parts of the city that the zoning may not change at all. For example, the villages area is already fully built out, but we certainly want to include it as part of our analysis of the character. So I just want to bring that up, that this doesn't necessarily mean that the zoning is going to change everywhere, but we're going to take a look through these character districts of whether there should be changes, that what is the nature of the changes that should take place based on the goals, preserving and enhancing, wanting to evolve it into the future. And so this is kind of the groundwork for the next steps of thinking about what are the regulations that are going to be put forth for the future that's going to implement the vision that takes place.
Thank you. You can leave it at that. So this is the point in our meeting where we actually get to engage and hear back from each one of you just in different stations. So we're going to do it in hybrid fashion. We're going to do it in person here and in our Zoom rooms. In the Zoom room, you're going to be broken out into 3 breakout rooms. So you will have a facilitator that will show you these different images as you're seeing here. We've set up these boards. We've printed and mounted the boards here, but you're going to look through these different visuals. And basically, we're going to run a visual preference survey. So you will use your red dots to tell us images that you just don't feel jive with your vision for downtown Fayetteville. You'll use green dots to let us know that these are the spaces, these are the kinds of buildings I want to see in my downtown. And for those in the Zoom room, you will let your facilitator know, and we'll have like a thumbs up, a thumbs down exercise. And this is for us to give us cues as we build these guidelines. We want to ensure that the guidelines we offer as we connect it with the code are things that are coming from your preferences, from the community's preferences. We already have heard through the survey a lot of ideas, but this is just our touch point to actually get it closer to creating guidelines. I did want to mention that everything that you've heard here today is in progress, which is why you're seeing words like preliminary, draft, you know, like there is nothing that has been approved. You are the first as our core team members and our community members to hear it. And this is something that we will work through as we get your feedback. So watch out for a date maybe in August or September where you'll actually see the final recommendations. But I did want to share that literally we are bringing things from our drawing board to you today to get feedback. So that brings me back to this before we break out into rooms. So there was a common understanding that this is prevention works. It actually looks right, but this is what it is, right? And the reason I'm sharing that is this is this point where as we look at these different visuals and as you interpret the plans and the drawings, you know, things might not look exactly what you have in mind, right? So they're going to look different. It might not be exactly what is your first preference, but I'd love for you to start this discussion with an open mind but share your thoughts, because as we look at this collectively, you never know. We could actually find that message that you started with, but it's just going to require some collective thinking. So with that, I'm going to shut off my screen here and break everyone into rooms. But if you can all get up, we have about 8 boards here. We've placed it in different stations. We want to continue maintaining social distance today. So if we can ensure that there is no crowding, we have facilitators who can get your feedback. If you have thoughts, feel free to take a sticky note and add your comments. But we would appreciate getting very direct and candid feedback, because this is going to inform our guidelines. So for our Zoom participants, let me see how many of us are here. So we're about 22. You're going to be requested to enter a breakout room. We have 3 facilitators. We have Marwa, Haley, and Doug, who will lead you through the visual preference. Go ahead.
So a short discussion on the maps, but there were a couple of questions related to specifics and details within here. And one question, Sheba, was are these images going to be available in the future to share with the participants today? And I didn't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I can address that immediately. Like we'll be publishing our final sometime in August. So like I mentioned, like this is almost just, you know, we brought these drawings from our drawing board. Nothing is final. We have to incorporate your feedback. So, but the recording of this meeting will be available online, which shows all the images too. But just like for you to remember that nothing is final.
Yeah, so there was interest in the text on here, and some people were having a hard time seeing the details, the recommendations within the parks plan here. Then another issue was parking. You know, how are we going to handle parking at the new nodes that we're proposing? And I think the answer I kind of gave is that that'll get studied in detail when those parks get developed and funded, and that every one of them will have a different answer. So I think it's a really good question to keep in mind, is parking in general. We had a very opinionated discussion on, multifamily did not get people too excited, but we got pretty interested in the mixed use discussion.
I see so much of thumbs down.
I couldn't find my thumbs up, so I had to use hearts. It got deleted. So, heart, you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
But the thumbs down, yeah, there was a lot of thumbs down. A lot of these images felt, I think, too modern and too large in general. And I think the real attraction was to kind of this medium scale, somewhat transitional architecture with the mixed use components at the bottom. I think that this was appealing to everybody on the call, I believe, and pretty much everybody said no to everything else. So it's a clear choice on that one. So interestingly, this group had a different take on some of the office proposals. It was, really kind ulliking this image on the image D, and part, I think, scale, but also kind of this ultra modern building here. And so I think there's a lot of interest in keeping the right scale and the right size of buildings and architecture in Fayetteville. That's kind of my takeaway from those discussions. And then lastly, this was the most engaging conversation, and we were in the middle of it when you cut us off. So thank you. But I think the consensus was, a lot of appreciation for the opportunity to be outdoors, which all of these have. But I think there was a particular draw to these areas where you can sit outside, get a meal, get a beer, walk around, be with your neighbors, go to a shop. So I think universally this board had the most likes. And we did not get to the green space, but I'm sure some others did.
Yeah. I keep thinking I should always write, don't shoot the facilitator. I always forget that, but still want to keep our time. So actually, maybe this is a good time. Russ, if you don't mind kind of giving us a summary of what you heard, but if you don't mind coming right here, because I think, the acoustics are not evenly distributed.
Should we bring the board?
You're welcome. Do you need help taking the boards? And so hopefully the Zoom audience can also hear us, but I know that they'll benefit from your.
Yeah, so I'll just sort of stand this here as I talk and maybe tilt this so people on Zoom can see. The board shows a lot of the visual preference with the red and green dots of what we liked and what we didn't like. And some of those post-it notes gather some talking points that we had throughout discussions when people were coming around and talking about what they like and what they don't like about parks and open space throughout the city. One thing that was mentioned that I'd like to talk about is we talked about this gateway potentially being on Jeff Davis. Currently, the gateway is on Glenn, I believe is the name of the street.
Glenn, yeah.
But currently, I think in order for Jeff Davis to be more of a gateway, this more kind of gets into transportation, but they were thinking that this intersection would probably need to be improved a little bit before that can take place, because currently everything is sort of directing everybody down. And there currently aren't any restaurants on Jeff Davis in the old historic homes that would kind of be more of a pedestrian-friendly environment. So I'm not sure how that could, I guess, transition, but more restaurants on Jeff Davis and those old historic homes would make it more of a vibrant gateway, I believe. Another thing that we talked about was the amphitheater. The amphitheater being, I guess it was developed close to the high school over here, but there was a community member that expressed the desire that it could be potentially somewhere else, but that also plays into the fact that this park could, I guess, provide a transition between area of activity and sort of the dislocated, not dislocated, but separately located. As you can see through some of these red and green dots, a lot of what is light are, one of the community members expressed a good point that we're kind of moving towards, we still want to keep our rural feel, but we're moving towards more of an urban environment, and which attracts more younger generations and things of that nature. So when we talked about a potential gathering space for like farmers market or community events and things like that, this area in between Stonewall and Lanier, Stonewall and Lanier, that this kind of setting where it looks more of an urban type of setting compared to the more rural type of setting would be more preferred, because I guess it was decided that's what we kind of where we want to move, and we want to attract the younger generations into this area. So that was one comment that we talked about. Also for trails, this wooden trail was really heavily liked, whereas instead of just like when we talk about trails, for instance, through this area, we'll talk about the new beer garden over here and the connections with the Southern Conservation Trust. Obviously, this is more expensive, but a lot of people are doing this now. This raised wooden boardwalk type of trail, and it seems to be very attractive, and it seems to be used by people of all ages, not just younger people, but older people, and everyone in between. So that was heavily desired. When we talk about the public spaces on this Jeff Davis area, this was the more preferred type where we sort of engage the street with some type of seating in between the actual home and the street. I think those are the main points that were discussed at our table. Oh, another great point that I want to point out is, the city of Atlanta is the city of trees, and they do a lot of development regulation on what kind of trees you can take down and incentivizing saving larger trees instead of just mowing the whole site down and replanting everything. So that was another comment that was received at our table, that it's really heavily designed to save as many existing trees for future development as possible. So.
All right. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Danny, if you had 60 seconds, what would you say about what you learned in terms of multifamily and mixed use?
So I think I learned that there are almost an equivalent number of likes and dislikes on some of our images, which is really interesting to see that play out. The most popular image was the lower right mixed-use multifamily, that sort of two-story building. That was also the most liked image the first time we showed this in the last phase. The comments that I heard while people were sort of looking at the boards, there was a sense of, this doesn't feel like it belongs here. They're sort of looking at an image and sort of saying, like, I don't know if that feels right. Oddly enough, the Meridian, the existing image of the existing apartment, got 4 green dots. So maybe that means that we're going in the right direction, or maybe those people have questionable taste. I don't know. But one thing I also noticed here was that of all of the architecture that we have in Fayetteville currently, this is the least familiar to what we have currently. We don't have very many buildings at this scale, and so I think it's easy to look at something that's 4 or 5 stories and think like, man, I don't know if that really works here. But one of the things I was sort of pointing out is that this type of development may not be online in Fayetteville for 10, 15, 20 years. It takes time to get to that level of density. So I think that may be part of the thing that's off-putting, is that it just doesn't, there's not anything around here that really starts to look like this. So I think there's maybe some trepidation.
It's one of the reasons why we couldn't even show an existing condition. If you noticed, like all our boards, we wanted to show you a snapshot of existing, but mixed use multifamily is something that we are moving towards, because we want for those who live to be either have access to where they work, or where they could have recreation, where they could even have childcare facilities. So that's a new typology. Jinwoo, if you wanted to share, like, because Doug mentioned that in his room, the offices, I think there was just like one example, right, that kind of rose to the top. How was it when you talked about offices? Like,
sure. So for offices, as I talk with people, I think the image like A, B, and the E, people like most. Okay. And I think the common reason I got from people is the glass and the solid, they have a good balance. So, thank you very much. Mm-hmm. So for the images people don't like, I think it's more kind of a pure like glass curtain wall or just pure glass storefronts. Mm-hmm. So people think that is too urban. It's more belongs to the northern part of Atlanta and then not here. So people like more like solid and a glass parts is more kind of a balance and then more fit to the existing urban culture, urban texture here. And also people really like this building. So yeah. they think, like the building kind of similar to this one, they really like. That's what I get. Yeah.
That's great, Jinwoo. Thanks for that summary. And maybe if we could finish up, Daryl and Neil, just like a couple of highlights from what you saw and heard.
Sure. All right. So the thing that really stood out on the mobility board, the transportation board, were the image in the center. I can't see that far, guys. But the image in the center of essentially the trail with the pocket park. Thank you. The pocket park. Perfect. So image C, the pocket park. With the trail connect up to it, and then essentially the main street. The idea being is that folks like the quaint small town feel, but they also like that the street was active with retail and folks were able to walk along it. Some of the images that people didn't like were the images where there was just a lot of hardscape. So that would be like image F and image F and image B. The idea is that they thought again, and I think somebody said it a feel for it being mostly something for the north side of the metro region, and it's just way too much pavement. I think somebody said it's already way too hot here, so why would we want to add more pavement? That sort of thing. So, and then of course, the one that everybody really hated was the picture of the existing and then I got one very spirited conversation about Jeff Davis and said, okay, leave Jeff Davis alone, but you can't move sidewalk back. So, make it walkable, but don't do anything else to Jeff Davis.
That's interesting.
Okay. With regards to retail active edge, I think there was appreciation for a mix of trees and vegetation and hardscape and lighting. So kind of that mix. And this image actually, it's a good point that the trees are young right now and it's fall, so there's no leaves, which is why some people might have, or I think there's one or two red dots, but they're not mature trees yet. So maybe in the future that grows in. But I think by and far, I think just the outdoor environments, people generally appreciate it. This one in the middle, C, was one which attracted a big crowd. Someplace I could bring my friends, well lit, it's safe from cars, and so that's kind of really the thrust of this. I think there's some individual features that some folks didn't like. For example, the projecting awning here, whatever that object is here in item B. So that's the gist of the kind of feedback on this board. Just one point about on character district and zoning, an interesting point. Someone asked about, I think similar to how Danny had mentioned something about how these types of buildings may not come online in 5 to 10 years. That one person brought up the like is is there, is there a recycling facility in this area? And, whether it's appropriate for downtown or outside, I don't know, but that's a good question, is that as the population grows, those types of uses are things you want to think about in the future zoning code.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, service areas, that's a really good point. Just to kind of mention what our immediate next steps are. I did want to touch on this, which I hope that you will all continue to go and look at our studies website. That's where we will post the recording of everything that happened today. And we'd love to hear your feedback. There are opportunities for you to continue giving feedback. And just to understand the process, there were a lot of questions when we broke out as to when is this going to get done. So did want to share that after we finish June, we're going to spend July and August really incorporating all your recommendations. And we're going to be demonstrating when we look at these character districts, we are intentionally looking at where our pocket neighborhoods can go. What happens when we just don't have, we have to provide for single family housing, but what happens when they coexist next to these neighborhood parks, and how can we break up parcels meaningfully? So that's what we'll be working towards, and we hope to publish a document and present it to Planning Commission. But before we wrap up, it is such an honor to have our mayor here. I'd love to hear a few words from you, sir.
Well, thank you, Chief. Good evening, everyone. It's always a pleasure to sit in and listen, and I think I gained a lot of insight and perspective when I hear not only the professionals, and I want to thank everyone who's representing the various groups who's leading us, their different consulting firms. But most important is I look around the room, I've listened to those who zoomed in when we were doing exclusively Zoom meetings. These are people who have invested in the community. Conservation Trust, people who lived here for a number of years. If I start listing people name by name, I'm afraid I might miss someone, so I won't do that. But what I'm seeing is what the City Council is very proud of, and that is we believe in getting information. And this LCI is a great nexus to what we're already doing with our staff. David Rass and his team are doing the UDO total rewrite. Brian Whisper is constantly out there beating the bush. In fact, he was on the ground level of doing the original master plan when I first came on board as an elected official in 2016. But I think that this is indicative of how we in the city want to continue to move the city forward and be progressive and making sure that we get inputs from the vast majority of the citizens. We realize we're not going to please everybody all the time. But when we have this type of collaborative input, I think you'll see with what we have gathered here with this new City Hall, it is going to be something that the people will say, you got it right. And that's what we're looking forward to, is making sure when this is done, you give us the feedback, and then we move forward, people say, you got it right. And it's going to attract more and more people. So thank you all for what you've contributed, and I look forward to the final results.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This brings us to the end of our community meeting. Really appreciate you joining us.